Hello travelers, Boardman21 here, and today I've got the best to worst mastery ranking for you. And with that, we're going to start off with what I think is the most outdated, worst synergetic mastery class that you can play in Last Epoch, and we're going to work our way all the way towards what I think is the best. Just to give you a heads up, if you're thinking about each mastery, where it ranks in my personal opinion on this list. So for number 1, we're going to go ahead and start off, or in this case, number 13. There are only 13 out of 15 masteries. We will get 2 new ones at the launch of 1.0, which I expect will be obviously on the top of this list if we remake the video. But for now, we have 13 masteries, and for the 13th, or in my case, the worst one currently implemented in the game, if you haven't noticed in the gameplay below, is going to be the Forge Guard. The Forge Guard just really lacks a lot of build diversity. It has a couple of minions, mostly just the Forge Guard manifest armor that you're playing with is going to be the main way that most people play with the Forge Guard. Some of its skills are really lacking. Some people have built some weird interactions around some things, but overall, no matter what site you choose to go and search for builds for manifest armor, you're just not going to find very many. Coming in at number 12, and just slightly better than the Forge Guard, we have the Shaman. The Shaman just lacks a lot of skill synergies. It's really outdated, probably one of the older masteries that are available in the game. Its skills and skill trees are pretty outdated, just like the Forge Guard, and overall, it needs a really big overhaul. There has been news that in 1.0, at least one of its skills, Tempest Strike, will be reworked, as well as I believe it is Ice Thorns is going to be replaced with something else. So it'll be really interesting to see what we get there. Hopefully it feels much better in 1.0, but as for now, I can barely rank it above the Forge Guard. Coming into the number 11 spot is the Spellblade for me, and this is in the Mage class, and the reason I rate this one so low is it just feels so old, and one, I just really don't like the playstyle of it, but on top of that, it's been years since it's really gotten any sort of update. A few years back, they gave us Flame Reave along with a couple of nodes inside the passive tree updated, but overall, the survivability is typically a little bit lower, a little bit harder to get to than a lot of the other masteries. On top of that, it does have a very high damage output class. It does have a good ways to stack up buffs in order to output a ton of damage in a single hit, but outside of that, I've just really never enjoyed it, and it is definitely in need of some more love. Coming in at the number 10 spot is going to be the Lich, and for this, the only reason I put it this low, not a couple of spots ahead, is just because it feels so one-dimensional. Everyone who plays this class always uses Reaper form. On top of using a Reaper form, you're pretty much always going to either play with Death Seal or Bone Curse. It feels like a lot of your skills are all placed in there. Not to mention you also have Transplant, so like 4 out of your 5 skills are almost always the same, and everyone plays it the same way. There are a couple of builds that stay out there, whether it be poison and dot damage versus hit damage, but I still feel like it lacks build diversity and really good synergies between the skills for it to really be considered in the top 5 for this list. So we're going to leave it at number 10 and move on. Coming in at number 9, we have the Druid Mastery, and with this mastery, it did get updated a while back when it came to the transformations and some of the skills having good synergies within those transformations, but outside of the transformations, the other skills you use and the passive tree itself really didn't see much of an update, and overall just feels really bad, especially compared to how many synergies you can find inside of the transformations. So once the passive tree gets some love, I feel like it'll be much better. For now, I can't really put it, below the 9th spot just because of how bad the synergies between the transformations and the passive tree is. So I really hope that passive tree gets a lot of love in the future, and then hopefully a lot of the other skills that you use while in your transformations see some love, and I'm sure they will down the road. But for now, it stays at number 9. Coming in at number 8, we have the Sorcerer, and the Sorcerer was one of the first classes I ever played in Last Epoch. I had high hopes for it, but of course, over time, it's been 5 years since I've started playing Last Epoch, and in that time, I don't think the Sorcerer has seen any love at all. Some of the skill trees, such as Meteor, have had some uniques implemented for him with Volcanic Orb and such. Some of them have seen their skill trees updated slightly, but not completely reworked, but overall, this class just feels very old, and for that reason, reason, I can't put it any higher in this list compared to some of the new masteries we have. So it's still a very fun mastery to play though. There's lots of build diversity. You have big power hitters like Meteor coming down. You can play with Fireball for synergies. You have Elemental Nova for good AoE and very fast attacking. So it has a lot of good synergies, still a very good class, and most of the masteries going from this point forward are going to start to feel that way. But for now, we're going to leave it at number 8. Coming in at number 7, we have the Necromancer. Now we are halfway through the list, and the Necromancer is one of my favorite, but probably behind the Void Knight, my favorite mastery to play. Unfortunately, it is a little outdated. What keeps it near the top of this list though is the fact that you have so many different minion skills, and then inside of each of those minions you have different elemental types and ways to play them. So there's a lot of build diversity when it comes to playing minions. Some are definitely stronger than others, but you can definitely play an Abomination build. You can definitely play a Golem build. You can definitely play Skeleton and Mages like I am here. You can definitely play Raised. You can do melee, and you can do ranged, and you can do spell. So there's a lot of options, a lot of build diversity, but that's mostly all reflected inside of the skills themselves. The mastery and the passive tree along with that mastery is definitely old and pretty outdated, and I can't wait till that gets updated, and that's the main thing causing it to still be this far down the list. Coming in at number 6, we have the Paladin, and the Paladin has a ton of build diversity as well, just like the Necromancer, but its tree's a little bit more useful. Now, while the Necromancer tree does have some minion support and a lot of the nodes reflect minion damage, the nice thing about the Paladin tree is a lot of times you run out of where you want to put your points because there's a lot of good spots to put it. And once you get to that point where there's a lot of nodes you'd still like to take and not a lot of points left over for your passives to make choices, that's when you know you're into a good tree, and almost all the masteries from this point out are going to reach that point on top of having good build diversity. Now with the Paladin, you can play things like here where we have you using multi-strike to proc smite. You can also play it where you just call smites down for damage. You can play it Spellblade, you can play it melee based, and you can play it throwing based. You can also play the Hammered In as this class. So the fact that all 3 damage types are available for you on top of being able to play physical or fire is pretty huge for it, and I feel like it's got a lot of build diversity and a lot of synergies going with it that makes it really nice. And that is why it reached number 6 on this list. Coming in at number 5, we have the Void Knight, and the Void Knight has one of my favorite builds of all time, the Auto Bomber in the game, so I felt a little biased putting this any higher because while it does have a lot of build diversity, it also does have one of the older passive trees, meaning there's not a lot of synergies. You're not going to find a lot of the skills being synergized with anything inside of the tree. A lot of the nodes just have kind of old things. They don't have any of the hybrid stuff that you normally get, but with that in mind, with this mastery, it has a ton of different playstyles. You can play it spell-based, or you can play it as a melee or throwing based class. Now with it, I prefer it to play spell-based, but the other theme mechanic behind this mastery that really moves it up is the echoes. And with the echoes, they've recently introduced such the Warpath echoing mechanic, and it's really allowed you to have not only a lot of build diversity, but just that feeling of playing completely different than all the other masteries, and that's why I've ranked it at the top 5 in this list. Coming in at number 4, we have the Beastmaster, and the reason the Beastmaster is up here because one, it is another minion-based class which has a lot of options between them. You can play with wolves, you can play with the wolves turned into squirrels, there is bears that are really good, you have the raptor that's pretty good, the scorpion, all of the pets are really good. Nothing's really quite as powerful as just the squirrels in general, but the other thing is they synergize really well with the passive tree. You have all the different aspects that was updated. This tree did get updated much more recently than a lot of the other masteries, and therefore those aspects like aspect of the shark, the lynx, the boar, all of those allow you to do certain synergies that makes the class feel much better overall. You can build into doing dot damage with melee attack speed, you can build into doing critical strike chance and leeching that damage, you can build into just straight up more melee damage with melee attack speed. So all of those different options that you have really allow you to really specialize into what you want and play different ways, which is really nice and why we've ranked it so high on this list. Coming in at number 3, we have the Marksman, and the Marksman is relatively new. It's only been out for a couple of years, and with it, it was a much faster paced class. A lot of the skills are newer, and you can definitely feel that with the synergies that are inside of them. And then along with that, you have some of the coolest nodes inside of all of Last Epoch, inside of the passive tree for the Marksman. Some new tech was brought in when they implemented those, and so you can just really feel the difference in that passive tree versus a lot of the other classes. You can play it mostly as a ranged bow playstyle kind of class, but it is possible to play it melee as well, or you can even do some throwing if you really want. There are some minions in it as well, such as the ballista, but overall you're doing a lot of different types of bow attacks, and there's many different ways to play it, which makes it a lot of fun. I definitely recommend checking it out. And coming in into the number 2 spot, we have the Bladedancer, and the Bladedancer is a very fast paced melee that allows you to also have shadows and things proc, which is really cool, kind of bringing in that aspect, kind of like the Void Knight. I really do like this class, although I don't play it as much. I'm just really stuck on the Void Knight and the Necromancer, but this mastery has been updated. It has a lot of great synergies, a lot of different ways to play it, and you have all of the different styles. You can do throwing damage, you can do melee damage, you can have skills that are channeled, you can have skills that are not channeled, you can straight up just hit enemies as fast as possible, you can try and get some AoE into the mix. Like, there's a ton of different options and a ton of different things you can do with this, and when you go inside of the passive tree, you'll see that as well. Tons of different ways to build, and that is why it has reached number 2 on this list. And then coming into the number 1 spot, we have the Runemaster, which is the most recent mastery put into the game, and following that trend is why I'm so excited for the other 2 masteries coming in at 1.0, is because they should be very, very good. But the Runemaster has tons of synergies, and along with the runic invocation and the ability to proc 40 different things based on the way that you have your runes in a specific order, it's just amazing, all of the different things that you can play with this build. To this day, people are still finding new things to do, new ways, new interactions, all the stuff within this, and the passive tree being updated as well. It's just really, really good. A very high damaging, very tanky class. Overall, I definitely recommend you checking it out. And with that, that's going to be the list of all the masteries currently implemented in the game, from worst to best. Let me know which mastery of yours is the favorite and which one you think needs the most work in Last Epoch in the comments below. As always, stay safe, guys, and I'll see you next time.